That's right. That's an experience of non-duality. But how is that experience known?
By awareness.
By awareness. So anything that awareness knows is what? An object in awareness. It's not awareness. Including experiences of non-duality. Including transcendental experiences. Including all of these wonderful meltings and mergings that take place in spiritual people's minds. How are those things known? Say your mind is dead. Say your mind is gone. This is a common experience. It's called monolaya. Somehow that passes for is meant to pass for enlightenment in some circles. If your mind is dead, you're enlightened. Well, how do you know that your mind is... Okay, your mind, we'll say there is such a thing as a dead mind. Your mind's not thinking. How do you know that your mind's not thinking? Huh? You're aware of the absence of thoughts in your mind. That's why. Huh? So that means what? The absence of thoughts or the presence of thoughts has nothing to do with you, does it?
And the waking state as well.
And the waking state as well. That's correct.
Because we know the waking state.
Yeah. And we know what we know and we know what we don't know. We know the presence of thoughts and we know the absence of thoughts. And neither one of those conditions, the presence of your thoughts, your thinking, or the absence of your thinking, what? Removes you. Does it? Nothing that takes place here in your mind qualifies you. That means what? When your mind goes away, you don't go away, do you? When your mind is gone, do you go away? No. How can you go away? Because you can't say your mind has gone away unless you're there to see it being gone, can you?
Yeah, but people will say, oh, that's just the mind. It's just the mind that sees the...
Well, they'll say that, but if you investigate your if you investigate your experience, you'll see that you are never not present. Can you ever be not present?
It still functions.
Huh?
It still exists. It still moves.
Well, you are existence.
So, would you say that Ramana was actually incorrect in talking about the dead mind, for instance, or did you put that down to translation?
Well, yes, if he defined the dead mind as enlightenment.
He did. That's the aim.
Huh?
At certain points it appears he did say...
Yeah, at certain points it appears that he did say the dead mind was enlightenment, but then what? Then, if the mind is dead, how do you know the mind's dead?
But there is a point where silence...
What?
There is a point where silence is very rare, but where silence is fulfill yourself on the outside, and you're not. It's very short period.
Yeah.
You don't have to check if your mind is here or not.
No, but okay, that's right. But how do you know the silence? You're aware of the silence. You cannot report the silence, the presence of silence, or the absence of silence unless you're conscious. So consciousness is prior to silence, and it's prior to what? Thought. That is, whether you're thinking or you're not thinking, you don't cease to exist. Thoughts and not everything. Actually, if you know your mind carefully, you'll see that there's a thought and then there's a gap, and then there's a thought and there's a gap. Isn't it? And the thoughts aren't piled up like this on top of each other. Thoughts are going like this and then like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, one right after the other. When there's a lot of pressure from your unconscious, they're so tight you can't see the gap or feel the silence or experience the silence between the thoughts.
It seems that gap's only experienced after the fact, when thought comes in, and then you have a recollection.
Well, yeah, that experience becomes a thought, and then you say...
Same as waking up from deep sleep. In deep sleep, there's no recollection in the moment, but when you wake up, you have the knowledge that nothing happened.
Yeah, inferential. The knowledge is inference, and inference is a valid means of knowledge. We're not quarreling with inference. It is a valid means of knowledge. But the point here is that the self, awareness, and the mind are in different layers or dimensions of reality.
Isn't that surely to some degree a practical dualism that you're employing there? Because the whole idea of perceiver and perceived, in a sense, is an infringement of the whole idea of non-duality.
Yes, it is.
And so, in those yogic circles, the whole point is that the threshold is the point at which you become that silence.
Oh, yeah, sure. But anything you become, you will unbecome. Anything you go into, you'll come out of. The purpose of that teaching about the mind, and we'll get to that when we talk about yoga, it's very valuable teaching, is for the purification of the mind. It's not for enlightenment. Anything you will become, you will what? Unbecome. Anything you go to, you'll have to go back to. That's duality. In this world, it's duality. And all experiences, including the experience of a stopped mind, is what? Dualistic. This is the whole experiential theory of enlightenment that we've already debunked. Now we're getting down to the practical ways in which this notion of experiential enlightenment is working out.
How can you say that for sure, that you will unbecome? Because, I mean, there's this arbitrary kind of...
Well,
now we're using dualism,
because you're not a doer, you're unborn and unmade, and you have no limits. So how can you go into something, and, right? If you are a person that thinks they go into something, right, you're going to go out of something. We've already said that you can't go anywhere or do anything. You're limitless. You're non-dual. So there's no going into anything. Things go into you and they go out of you. In other words, they appear in awareness and they go out of awareness. But you aren't going into anything or going out of anything. The mind changes. That's true. We agree with that. But you're not the mind. If you identify with the mind and you buy this yoga teaching, then you're going to what? You're always going to be looking for what? Disillusion, for samadhi, for nirvana, for nirvikalpa samadhi. And what happens to all these experiential samadhis? Every single one of them ends because they're all in Maya.